It's always a new list on what Medicaid may or may not pay for. We also have secondary insurance that's a private insurance. Often things aren't covered for the triplets. Cochlear implants, we have to go through two separate services to make sure things are getting paid for. We're constantly getting bills in the mail that we aren't responsible for that take time for us to sort out with the insurance companies or with the medical provider.
The girls were really happy, up to about 2 years old, and then they started getting frustrated, and they were on the floor in the fetal position, beating themselves and banging their head against the floor. And I thought, what happened to my happy babies? So I kept taking them to the doctor thinking that something was wrong with their stomach, like they were in pain. That's where they were bending over. And they couldn't find anything wrong with them. So, the therapists that were working with them, everybody noticed this change. And then when I'd go to different appointments, they would throw up in the car every time we went somewhere. So I'd have to take all their car seats out, hose them down, put them in the wash, change their clothes. So that was difficult. But what I later learned is since they were losing their hearing slowly at progressive sloping loss hearing, that it can make you nauseous and have some vertigo and make you uncomfortable. So not only were they frustrated by losing sound, they were also experiencing all these other problems. But by the time their hearing loss leveled out, that went away.
The triplets do have several medical challenges. We've been very blessed that they're not sickly children. However, there are a lot of issues with cochlear implants, prosthetic eyes, and the day-to-day problems that any healthy child can have. In any given week, we may see ophthalmologists, we may see audiologists, we may see their pediatrician. Depending on the issue, the cochlear implants have 3 different offices that we have to see in downtown Houston just to make sure that they're working properly. Part of the implant is inside their heads, so that's something that is always in the back of our minds, that if anything were to go wrong there, it's difficult for us to assess what it could be without actually going down and having x-rays done, which, interestingly enough, because it's magnetic, our children cannot have MRIs. If they were to if a technician or a nurse or a doctor were to accidentally give them an MRI, it could very well kill them.
For George, Liz, and their children, simply getting from one day to the next can be a challenge.
A typical day for me starts about 5 o'clock in the morning. It's just me and Liz, so some days I let her sleep, other days she lets me sleep, but for the most part we get up 5 o'clock, get in there and see what the kids have done.
And we get them dressed. And we try to help them dress themselves. So, for example, I'll start pulling down their diaper halfway and hope that they'll pull it down the rest of the way. And then it's the same thing, putting on the diaper, putting on the pants, help them find the inside of the shirt, help them put their arms through it, just trying to get them to the point where they'll be able to do those things themselves in the morning.
Starts with socks, shoes, pants, shirts. Now this is times 3, so then we get sports bras that they wear, these special little bras for their cochlear implants.
Then I have to test all their cochlear implant equipment and put MS prosthetic eyes in.
Get clips and ribbons and hair gel and toothbrushes and get all that stuff laid out.
Then we fix their hair and we weave the cochlear implant into their hair so they can't pull it off.
You put it on, wake up. Wake up. There you go. Can you hear mama?
Each kid has, because they're slightly different in size, I got to figure out which clothes fit which kid. Now I get the kids out. So I get the kids out of there, and usually if they've stayed up all night, they're like logs, so they're dead weight. So I get them out and start to dress them. The bus gets here at 7, take them to school. So I've got about an hour window to get all this done, so I'm hustling.
Get them downstairs, and one thing I do is try to help them walk down the stairs on their own instead of carry them. And we get into the kitchen, and I make 3 different breakfasts because they don't eat the same things at any meal.
The bus picks them up at 7 o'clock. Then it's all deafblind children's fund all day. And I do that, and Liz works to try to bring in what income we can so we can keep this house afloat and keep everybody in food and clothes. And that's what the day looks like. Then the girls get home. They arrive back here at 4.
We might take them outside to swing on the swing set or jump on the trampoline, and then it's time for dinner. And then after dinner, we clean up the kitchen, and we take them upstairs and put them in the bathtub and try to help them learn to wash their hair and to get out of the bathtub and find the towel and dry themselves and put their night clothes on and put them to bed.
Everything we have to be hitting our marks. Liz and I both have to be on our A game all the time. I mean, because if we're not, this happens. We got piles and piles of laundry. We have to stay on top of that.
Take a moment and just imagine trying to explain the color red to a person born blind.
Take a moment and imagine explaining pitch to a person born deaf.
The problem in both cases is that there is no point of reference from which to begin,
We can, at best, explain what a specific pitch or color means to us.
or how a particular observation makes us feel.
Now imagine trying to get through complicated directions from someone who doesn't speak your language.
상어는 작아서도 아닌 상어는 개서도 않은 좀 모티 제비 작아 모티 와이
First, you need to make them understand what you need. Then, you have to figure out their answer. Gestures might be enough, but without a formalized language, miscommunications are not so much possible as probable. Education involves two things, a common language and a common point of reference. Most children develop these things naturally through observation and mimicry in their younger years. But in order to teach a deaf-blind child, you must create both. The education of children who are deaf-blind in America has changed significantly over the past several decades.
If you trace the history of the education of kids with deaf blindness in our country, you really note that it began about 30 years ago. As a result of the rubella population or the etiology of rubella, which is German measles, mothers attracted rubella and were having babies who were deaf-blind. Because of that, the federal government recognized that there was a need to educate more teachers and that we didn't have enough professionals who understood exactly what were the techniques, the strategies, the things to use to help development and learning for kids with deafblindness. So they put money into a federal program that established regional centers to influence the education of kids with deafblindness. During that time, the kids with deafblindness were usually congregated in separate settings, in institutions, in separate schools, etc. So the federal program would provide expertise to provide training or even at that point direct service and education to kids with deafblindness.
Children identified as deafblind were primarily educated in segregated schools and institutions.
However, today, it is more likely that these children are learning along with their sighted and hearing peers in the neighborhood schools.
Child development is incredibly important. With regard to the triplets, a typical child here at that age would be in kindergarten, first grade. Our academic level is higher than most, if not all, American schools based on the British curriculum. So we're a year advanced, more advanced than American schools anyway. So for that age, they would be in a kindergarten class learning a first grade curriculum.
Many of our schools for the deaf and blind have integrated their deaf-blind students within the context of their general education programs.
In addition, there has been an increase in the number of children identified as deafblind and in need of specialized educational support.
Private schools in the British system, and especially Paddington, isn't governed by cuts, and in American schools where you have a cut, the first thing to go is music and the arts and drama, whereas in British schools it's a really fundamental and integral part of the curriculum, and that's what we tend to do here in Paddington as well. Even though these little ones are aged 2 through 6, we expose them to the fine arts, and we believe that it is a crucial part of their education, because the preschool years is where your child's educational journey begins.
Since the mid-1980s, the number of children who are deaf-blind needing services has nearly tripled,
increasing from roughly 4,000 to more than 10,000 today.
I started researching online about the Texas School for the Blind, that they had a deaf-blind outreach and that they were developing programs, and it was still pretty much in the infancy type thing. And they came in and they said, no, you have to educate this child like he's deaf-blind. You can't educate them like he's blind or he's deaf. It's a whole different ball game.
Despite the growing number of children and an increase in the complexity of their needs,
Federal funding for this group has remained unchanged.
So we have seen virtually not only